Hello. Thanks, everybody. Oh, no.
What?
No. All right. Hi, everybody. There we go. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Carl Attia Swanson. I'm the Springboard for the Arts Director of Movement Building, and I'm joined here by Andy Sturdevant, who is
Artist Resources Director.
Yes, for Springboard for the Arts.
This is a more boring title than you, Carl.
Well, we do what we can, Andy. You do more exciting things than me.
Well, we can debate that over the course of the next hour.
It's true. For you tonight, thanks for joining us for the Creative Exchange Hangout, where we talk about toolkits and some of the projects that are on the Creative Exchange platform that you can do in your community. You can find Creative Exchange at springboardexchange.org. You can also join in this conversation via Facebook or Twitter. We're live tweeting at Create Exchange. So feel free to shoot your questions to us. And thanks for joining us today. We're talking about the community-supported art toolkit. And
one of the first toolkits.
One of the very first toolkits. How it came into being, what it does, what you can do with it. The community-supported arts toolkits really came from taking an idea from someone else, didn't it? We sort of hijacked an idea for this.
Yeah, it was. This toolkit came about very organically, which is always a good sign. Yeah, should I just start with the history of the community-supported art program?
Yeah.
The community-supported art project is a project that is about 5 years old. We launched the first one in 2010. This was a collaboration between mnartist.org here in the Twin Cities and us, Springboard. And we were talking about patron education. We were talking about how you can get art into people's hands, how you can build bridges between people that are maybe interested in art, interested in local movements, but for whatever reason don't feel like they have the tools to be a part of the art community. Maybe there's an intimidation factor, or maybe they don't know, how do you find art?
Yeah.
I mean, it can be kind of a difficult thing.
There are a lot of different entry paths into that.
Exactly, yeah. And some of them do seem, if you're not like an art person, they can seem kind of intimidating and weird. And so we were talking about systems and how can you get local art into people's hands directly. What are some mechanisms for doing that? And one of the ideas that came up was the idea of community-supported agriculture, especially I think in a place like the Twin Cities, and I think in most places in America, where you can drive 50 miles in any direction and be in farmland. There's an understanding of the CSA model, and there's an understanding of how community-supported agriculture works.
Yeah, and especially with the growing locavore movement and farm-to-table restaurants.
Exactly.
It's
something that's definitely on people's minds. So, so we were thinking of, what is like a CSA that we could do for art. Of course, the thing that's the most like a CSA is a CSA. The acronym is even the same. And so we took that exact idea, the idea that local artists would create artwork specifically for a box of art, and then that box of art would be sold to shareholders, and they would pay their money, and then they would get at the end of the growing season, a big box of art of work by local artists that had been created for the parameters of the project. And there'd be a couple of big parties where people would come out, the artists would get to meet the shareholders, and be able to have conversation, exchange contact information, and people would get, a box of really great local art.
Yeah, and like the community-supported agriculture, you know the farm or where the farm is. In this sense, you know who the artist is, who made the art that you're getting.
Yep, you point to the wall and you say, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. I met him or her, very nice person. And maybe you'd be able to do a studio visit with them, or at least get on their mailing list and go to some of their shows if they have things coming up. So this was a project that launched in 2010, and it got a lot of really nice coverage regionally. And almost immediately we started to hear from people saying, well, this is a cool idea. I'd like to do something like this in my community. Could Springboard come out to my community and show me how it's done? The answer there, of course, is, well, no, probably not. Because every community is different, and people know their own communities. There's not like a sort of top-down prescription for doing this kind of work. It varies a great deal based on like the where and the whens and the whos. So instead of coming out to do like in-person consultations and going through the system that way, we decided to write a toolkit that just laid out in the clearest language possible everything that a person would need to do, everything that an organization would need to do. So like a sample budget, templates for press releases, templates for, calls for work, who to have on the jury, what kind of artwork works well, what kind of artwork doesn't work well. Where do you get a wooden box, which turns out to be kind of a difficult thing, actually. All those really nuts and bolts kind of stuff. We put those into, I think it was like a 25-page document originally, and made that available to anybody that asked for it, and told people that they could do what they wanted with it.
How many people have done what they wanted with it at this point?
It's a little north of 40. So it's a little over 45 organizations and that many cities in North America.
US, yeah.
Across North America. There's been a couple Canadian programs too, that have had CSA programs, and some of them have been one-offs where they just did one season and that was it. Others have continued to do 2 and 3 seasons. I think we're kind of in our 3rd generation of CSA programs in some cities, and it's been all over the map in terms of what people have done with the numbers. I mean, some of the do you want to, before you tell people what the difference is, do you want to tell them how we do the numbers and how it breaks down for us? Yeah, absolutely. For us, typically, and this has changed from year to year to some extent, but typically we've done 50 shares by 9 different artists. So what that means is 9 artists making 50 individual pieces of work, whether that's an edition, whether that's 50 unique pieces, whether that's 50 prints. And that work is then made available to 50 shareholders. And those are $300, $350, depending on the season. And the artists get paid anywhere from $1,000 to $1,250 in our model. And we've heard some people say, that seems to be a low number for making 50 pieces of work, which we've always tried to promote that you want to have a project that is scaled to that rate. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we do when we're selecting the artist is we put out a call for proposals, not a call for work. So people don't necessarily send us work samples of the sort of work that they do, or they do, but they send proposals for specific projects that fit the parameters of the project. So something where there can be 50 of them, and there's not too much hardship, on the part of the artist to create that. And people have had all sorts of different approaches to that. I mean, artists that make bigger work or site-based work have used it as a really great opportunity to play around with some ideas on kind of a smaller scale. And those ideas have then found their way into the artist's larger body of work. And obviously for someone like a photographer or a printmaker or a functional ceramic artist, that's the kind of format typically they work in anyway. So it works out really well for those disciplines. Yeah. But so in other cities where the artistic communities have been different in whatever ways, some of them have lowered the price significantly so that the shares are cheaper. Some have made them quite a bit more expensive because the work that is included is a little bit more involved. The number of artists has changed. We've always done 9, but some cities have done as few as I think 4 or 5. Some have done as many as 20. And we actually did 18 one year. We probably will not do it. Which we learned that 9 works for our community. That's the great thing about doing something for 5 years is you start to get a sense for what works and what doesn't over time, and you can adjust over time. We try to pass the knowledge on to you where we can. So that model has been very adaptable for a lot of different cities. And I mean, I should say that the cities where it's been done, some don't even really qualify as cities. They've been small towns in some cases. So it's been everywhere from, very small towns in America to, larger cities, New York and Chicago and a few others. You have some of the CSA artwork that's been produced in our 5 years here. It's been kind of sitting off camera here. Yeah, do you want to share a little bit of it? Yes, let's take a look at some of it. This here is, of course, a box. Right here. CSA stamp. Yep. It's kind of funny. It's not super easy to find these boxes sometimes. This one was made by a very sweet couple in Elk River, Minnesota, who run a box factory out of their basement. Nice. But these are some really nice examples of work by artists in all points in their career. I would say some of these artists qualify as very established artists, and artists qualify as very, still very emerging artists. And across disciplines too. This is a piece by Amy Rice right here. Printmaker,
And these are prayer flags for pollinators.
Prayer flags for pollinators, yeah, exactly. And another thing that is really important for the CSA artist is to have them package their own work, because that saves time for the administrative side of things, but also makes for a very nice little package. And so Amy made a really great package that has her contact information, that has some information about, there we go, the project. Yeah, and they're exactly what they sound like. They're prayer flags for animals that are working as pollinators.
Yeah. Caterpillars and bees,
yeah, caterpillars, bees, things
milkweed,
like that.
and things like that.
And it was a print, so she was able to knock it out, fairly quickly. But it's a very attractive item. Another, I think, one of my favorite examples by an artist named Erica Rowe, who's a photographer. And of course, we've had photographers that have just submitted prints of their work, and then that's been really nice. But she took a very novel approach, which I think is totally brilliant.
And this is a gorgeous little
very nice little box,
too.
first of all. But you remember these things, right? These are viewfinders, three-dimensional viewfinders. So what she did is she took some photographs using a three-dimensional camera that she had been kind of playing around with. And this is an example of an artist that was playing around with some ideas in her own time as part of her own practice, but really hadn't integrated it into the larger part of her practice. And this was a good opportunity to kind of take some experimental ideas and play around with them. Anyway, what she did, ooh, we can see it right there. Oh, it's upside down. There it is. It's an umbrella hanging from a tree. I wish you could see it.
That probably.
I don't know. Let's try this.
Might.
Let's see.
Getting there, sort of.
Oh, that's kind of.
There you are.
Yeah, that's sort of right.
Yeah.
She took some three-dimensional photographs using her three-dimensional camera and had them manufactured into slides just like this that go into these viewfinders. So it's this really great three-dimensional view of some of her photographic work. Yeah. And as far as the production side of things, that really was not that difficult to do. The biggest part was just paying for the manufacture of the item. But it's something that is really representative of her work, but was not terribly difficult to turn out 50 of them. It's not like pulling 50 prints or anything. And it's a totally unique item too, which is certainly a big part of it.
Can I share one more? Let's see.
Yeah. Let's see. And another, they can be art objects, but also functional items work well too. This is the work by Ginny Sims, who's a ceramic artist. It is a funnel, exactly what it looks like. A very high-functioning funnel. I grabbed one of these for myself, actually.
Yeah, but it's a gorgeous piece.
It's a gorgeous piece, very nice aesthetically, little leather handle right there, and her name on it too, as well. So really gorgeous piece, but really high-functioning, and also gives a good sense for the sort of work that Ginny does. And of course, with these, in the boxes, there was information about her work, some examples of it, and then ways to, links to her site to buy some.
Yeah,
I commissioned some work from her actually as a result of this fine piece.
Nice. Yeah. So we've had printmakers who've moved into flags and photographers who've moved into viewfinders and ceramicists who are making funnels. What have been some other adaptations from across the country that have been exciting or interesting to see, and then to incorporate into the toolkit as well?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of work that's been made all over the country is, it covers it covers so much territory. I know that there are artists that have successfully worked in musical elements, performance elements. There's just been some kind of fun, sort of uncategorizable pieces. I know in the Pittsburgh CSA, they had somehow accessed one of Andy Warhol's T-shirts. Andy Warhol was, of course, from Pittsburgh, and the Pittsburgh is the home of the Warhol Museum. And Warhol had these time capsules that he would, just put a couple things in, whatever's lying around the factory that day, and seal them up. And so they're all stored there. So somebody had gotten a hold of a T-shirt of his, and so it actually cut up the T-shirt into 50 pieces and put it in a capsule, and that was the work, which is pretty high concept, but it's certainly like a totally unique piece that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I think in Lincoln, Nebraska, they had worked with the state poet laureate to make a kind of a hand-pulled edition, letter set edition of one of his poems that was signed, and they got this, the shareholders got this really beautiful physical piece of this poem by the poet laureate that he had signed, and of course he was at the events, I think to read them. So just a nice connection between a lot of these different disciplines and things that work well as objects, but also have some kind of interesting story or interesting origin to them.
Yeah.
And are totally unique experiences.
And New Hazlitt Theaters adapted the CSA model to a performance model,
Yep.
so to support new performance ventures as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
They commissioned some work that the shareholders could buy a share in, and then that would get them a ticket to see the work being performed.
Yeah. So Springboard has been doing this for 5 years, and we've had essentially the toolkit for 4 of those years and adapted it. What have been some of the biggest changes sort of from version 1 to version 2 of the toolkit? What's been some stuff that's helped go move it along there?
I mean, it's funny because you think you're putting together a toolkit like this, you can anticipate people's questions, and for the most part you can, especially if you've been doing it for a while. But the things that ended up changing, the things that people ended up asking about were not things that I would have anticipated. A big one was the wooden boxes, like where people would call me from all across the country and say, where did you get those wooden boxes? And I tell them, well, I got them at the Elk River Box Factory. I don't know if they, and I had to drive a U-Haul up to Elk River to go pick them up. So just little things like that. I mean, the things that got changed in the second edition were things related to very like nuts and boltsy, very small scale stuff that you wouldn't have necessarily anticipated. But definitely that question about like where you get the wooden boxes and how you find them was a big one. In terms of timing and promotion, that's also something that changed a lot. We've learned a lot in the last 5 years about what works, what doesn't. Like buying print advertising, for example, doesn't work. I mean, it probably works for somebody, but in this media market anyway, it wasn't super effective, and it was kind of expensive actually. So that's one of those things that we could pass on. We could say like, you can incorporate print advertising if you want, but it didn't work super well for us.
Right.
What did work well was newspaper coverage and public radio. And here are some steps for encouraging some of that kind of coverage.
And we have a budget in the toolkit that is based off of what we've learned and what we've done, but is really easily adaptable to the community that wants to replicate it, wants to do it.
And the other thing that we put in here, I think, that was important, and something that we hadn't maybe initially anticipated, but CSA doesn't really work as a fundraising mechanism. It's not really meant to raise money for an organization. That's not to say that it can't be adapted, but it's really meant to find new audiences for artists and to put money directly in those artists' hands. If you look at the budget, most of the money is going to the artist. The stuff that is not going to the artist is, the event planning, a little bit of staff time, boxes, always comes back to wood boxes. Just all those other things that you need to take into consideration as well. Yeah. But the idea is that most of the money, the majority of the money, goes directly to the artists. Straight to them. So you can play around with those numbers, based on the size of your organization, the amount of staff time that you need, all those other logistical factors. But the important thing is that most of the money goes to the artists, and it works to raise the profile of the artists and to build new audiences for the artists, not necessarily to raise money for an organization.
Would you recommend that it's an organization that does this versus an individual who starts something?
More or less I would, yeah. An organization can look a lot of different ways, of course. I mean, there have been individual artists that have run CSA programs. I think it's more difficult, though. I think that if this is something that you want to do and you are an individual artist, you're best served by either finding a partner, finding an organization to partner with, whether that is a presenting organization, whether that's a gallery, whether that is, even something like a food co-op, an arts council, something like that. Or if it is just you as an individual artist, finding a couple other people to kind of get together with on as well. Because obviously the more people you have involved, the easier it is to get word about it out. And that's definitely the hardest thing with CSA is selling the shares. That's the part that is certainly the most difficult.
Yeah, you are acting as the seller and broker for this work, so you want to bring people into it.
Right, and we do it here with actually a pretty small staff. I mean, I work on CSA. My counterpart at MN Artists, Jared Patrick, works on it. And then of course Carl pitches in, our executive director pitches in. But most of the day-to-day work is done by the two of us, and we can generally handle it. But that's because we're also in an organizational framework that
support that
kind of work. Yeah, exactly. So I would encourage anybody that is thinking about taking this on as a one-person project to maybe call it
a friend or two,
a friend or three.
Yeah. And also, I mean, being inside of an organization does also have some assistance with sort of that upfront cash. If you want to pay artists upfront, or at least partially, planning for that kind of prospect.
Exactly. So it does help to have a little pool of money that you can dip in and out of. And there's been a lot of different ways that other programs have handled that. Sometimes the artists are paid half upfront and then half on the completion of the work. But the timing is kind of important. So the shares go on sale pretty early, before the work is made. But they go on sale with the knowledge of who the artists are. And that's where it also kind of helps to have some names too. I mean, locally, if you have artists that are participating that have, that people know about, that people like their work. Having that information available up front, and then selling the shares right away so that the money is coming in, pretty much from the beginning, and then making it so that you can pay the artist in a timely fashion.
And ideally, the program is self-sustaining. It funds itself just through its sales. It covers the artist fees, and then the other sort of administrative parts of it as well.
Exactly, which is, again, back to the point of what the project is about. I mean, it's about getting artists working in new hands and raising their profile. And so it supports just that. But it doesn't, it's not a fundraiser.
Right.
I feel like that's something it's important to repeat.
What's been your favorite thing over the past 5 years? What have you enjoyed?
Seeing the artwork has always been really great. But there has been a lot of really interesting opportunities too, that have come up in relation to the artists themselves. Last year, we added a facet of the program where we went to go studio visits around the state, around the cities mostly. Artists who had been working, on pieces, made their studios available, open for a little get together. So some of the shareholders came in, had some wine, had some cheese, got to meet the artists, got to see the work being made. And one of the trips was down to Chatfield, Minnesota. An artist named Carl Unosh, who had done a really great project for us the first year, and then did a really great project for us last year too. He has sort of an art studio / farm / communal free-for-all down in Chatfield, which is a tiny, well, actually it's in Pilot's Mound, which is like one street with no stoplight. There's like a town hall, a Lutheran church, and this old mercantile storefront that he had grown up very close to. He'd grown up like one town over, and he ended up buying it and making it his studio, where he does a lot of casting. And so, he had like students from the local community college running around helping him with casting projects. And, we just got to see his farm, his garden, his studio, where he does his metalworking. And it was just a really crazy, great afternoon. And obviously not all the shareholders were there. This is kind of a day trip, it's sort of hard to make it down. But the artists, the shareholders that did, had a really, really good time. And it was just a totally unique experience. That probably wouldn't have happened otherwise.
A really great way to connect, again, artists and community members and buyers and really build that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Andy.
Oh, thanks, Carl. It's my pleasure.
If you want the community-supported art toolkit, you can find it at Creative Exchange, which is at springboardexchange.org. We're sharing stories about artists who are working in community, these practical toolkits from programs that are proven, that have results that you can create and adapt for your community. You can find them all online, springboardexchange.org.
And one more important point.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
With the CSA toolkit, and with all the toolkits, but when you make a request for the toolkit, you're not just downloading it from the site, it's being emailed to you by me personally. And there is always time to talk you through questions that you might have with the kit. So if you request the kit, you're not on your own. You can always give me a call, you can send me an email, and I'm very happy to answer any specific questions that you might have about the program. So it's a very one-on-one kind of thing. That's why I feel like I know a lot of the replication programs around the country pretty well, because I've talked to most of them on the phone, or at least by email.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today. Creative Exchange is a program of Springboard for the Arts in partnership with Issue Media Group, with key support from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Find us online at springboardexchange.org. You can email me directly at creativeexchange@springboardforthearts.org or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.